I'm just going to close a door. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
All right, well, we're going to get started with our next edition of Museum Time Machine, Destination Shark Infested Waters with Dr. Leif Tapanila. Just a quick, we are recording and we are also live on Facebook. Anytime you'd like to ask us questions, feel free to use the Q&A option in Zoom or the comments in Facebook, and I will get them to Leif. Go ahead, Leif, take it away.
Hey there, so welcome to you all wherever you happen to be. I'm here in the museum here. We've got a shark behind me. I'm going to stand up and walk over to him so you can get a sense of how big these sharks actually got. Just a sec. So here he is. This is Helicoprion. We're going to talk about him in a second. My audio will be better if I stand over here. So there's Helico. It's the, I like to think of it as the Idaho mountain shark because it's found here more than anywhere else in the world. And I'm going to tell you all about it. If you have questions, we have a way for you to get that into us and interact. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen here and tell you a little story about this critter. Hopefully you can see my screen right now. So I called it the shark infested waters. Okay, so Idaho had an ancient seaway here, and it's really impressive what actually is recorded in the state of Idaho for a large period of Earth's history when we were underwater, way before the mountains built up, way before there was a continent really here to stand on. There was a very, very different world. And so I'm going to tell you about that story today. And I'm going to tell you about some of the animals, in particular the sharks that lived here, that we should be really proud of. They're quite impressive beasties. All right. So I feel I should start here. Our world has been changing for as long as the world has been here. Our best estimates is that the planet is 4.54 billion years old. That's a lot of time, over 4,000 million years of time. And one of the ways that our world changes is that the continents themselves that we sit on, that I'm sitting on here, they move over time. This idea of continental drift is an old idea that goes back to the 1915 period. And there was a very smart feller who figured out, looking at all of the continents of the world and how the map is arranged, that, I wonder if all of those continents might have been together at one point. And in the last 100 years, people have figured out, looking at the evidence and demonstrating that indeed continents drift around through a mechanism called plate tectonics. I won't really get into that, but that the continents have drifted over time. And so what you're seeing in this video is a sort of cartoon of North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, and there goes India, that they're moving around. And the numbers on the left-hand side tell you how many millions of years ago this happened. Yes?
You'll need to share your screen. We can't see it.
I'm not sharing my screen. I'm going to share my screen.
Thank you.
That's good. Share screen. Let's see. Who can share? No. All right, this is going to change everything. Can you see my screen? Can you see, right? Oh, technology, I love it. That was my first slide. Okay, can you see my second slide? Woo. Hey, sweet. Sorry about that. So as our world is changing now, we can see our continents moving around. Yay, there they go. And this is just showing us the last 250 million years of the continents drifting around. The point of me showing this slide and showing you this image and talking about how the planet changes over large periods of time is often I am asked the question, which is a very reasonable question, by the way, why on earth should Idaho, which is miles and miles and miles from the ocean today, why would we have ocean rocks preserved here in eastern Idaho? And the answer is, in the long way, the world changes. The world changes in a big way if you have enough time. And we've had hundreds and hundreds of millions of years to really reconfigure the location of the continents. So just in this little GIF that I'm showing right now, it's tracking the last 250 million years of the continents moving around. And hopefully you can see that North America is kind of dancing around with the other continents. And then eventually, oh, the Atlantic shows up and pushes us apart away from Europe and eventually South America away from Africa to get us to the continents that we know and live on today. But the important part of all of this is if we go back in time and if we find a record of rocks that record ancient time, we should expect that, or we could expect that what once was ocean today is now mountains and continents, and that this changes over time. So what we're talking about today is a time period in Idaho and the rest of the world, a time period that's a long time ago, right? 275, give or take, million years ago, in what we call, the geologists have named this time period the Permian. The Permian time period is a long chunk of time, but it occurred about 270 million years ago, and the continents all were sandwiched together at this time period, much like the beginning of that last slide. And so maybe you can pick out where Idaho is on this picture. We're north of the equator. We're right on the west coast of North America. I'll show you in a second. But this is a very different looking world than the one we're in today. This is when all the continents were last all together, forming the supercontinent we call Pangaea. And Pangaea, of course, is a name that I think a lot of people have heard of before, this idea of the supercontinent. Okay, so during that time, all the continents are merged together, and we are located, Idaho and Pocatello in particular, is located right at the, kind of at the tip of that arrow. And if you look at where the tip of that arrow is on the map, we are the west coast of North America. Washington, Oregon, California hadn't been invented yet. They are still off to sea, and they're actually coming, they're slamming into us around this time period, okay? So they aren't part of the picture. We are the west of North America. We are underwater. We're under maybe 300 feet, 200 feet of water. In my world, we call that shallow marine water. That's not super deep, okay? Now, if you look at this picture very carefully, at the end of that arrow, not only are we on the west coast, but you can see this little blue sliver that goes in. Maybe my little cursor will show up right there. We've got this little bay that goes eastward into land, right? And so this is a very shallow finger of ocean that extends into our area. Geologists have named that little finger of water, they call it the Phosphoria Sea. And it covered eastern Idaho, northern Utah, cut into Montana a little bit, and up to the Tetons in Wyoming, okay? So it's about that big. It's not really big, but it's really, really significant, and I'll show why in a second. Now, if you just happen to be around in the Permian 275 million years ago, you'd probably be living on land because you're a human and you like being on land. If you were on land and you were in the Texas region, because Texas has beautiful Permian land rocks, you might find animals that look like this. And I show this picture not because it's a complete view of what life is like on land, but it's maybe the most familiar animals that you know of dearly from the Permian. We have the sailback, sometimes it's called the sailback dinosaur. Oof, hurts my feelings. Not a dinosaur, right in the middle of the screen, that's Dimetrodon. All those 5-year-olds out there would know that. And Dimetrodon is a predatory mammal. It's a mammal from the Permian, a synapsid. And right next to it, next to its mouth, conveniently, is another sailback mammal that's called Edaphosaurus. It's a vegetarian and was probably getting eaten by this terrible carnivore. And then we also have giant amphibians. Here's a giant amphibian in the background called Eriops. Anyway, if you were on land, there's a lot of things to be nervous about, right? Pretty cool place to be, but we're not going to talk about that because Idaho doesn't record land in the Permian. We record ocean. So what does the ocean look like back then? 275 million years ago, this is a picture, or at least how an artist has imagined what the seafloor would look like based on the fossils that we find in this region. We see all sorts of sea creatures. Maybe you won't recognize them all. If some of you may have heard of a crinoid, they're very, very common fossils in old times. We have a little bit of crinoids still around today in the oceans, but they're kind of weird. We have lots and lots and lots of sponges, okay? We have corals. These are swimming cephalopods that are related to squid and modern nautilus. They're ammonoids. So they're swimming around, they're predators and pretty big body. We also have, well, there's a trilobite down there. Oh, how cute. And we have some other sea creatures that are on the seafloor. But then swimming above, of course, we have lots and lots of fish, including several different kinds of sharks. In Idaho, in particular, we get one a lot of, and that's the one we're going to talk about in a minute. So life is doing great, honestly, during the Permian. This is a really good time period until the very end, when there's a worst mass extinction ever, but we're not going to go negative. During the Permian, everything's really happy, hunky-dory, lots of big life. Life is good, man. Okay, so come back to this picture, and here's this little finger that I talked about, the finger of water that extends into our region in Idaho, eastern Idaho, called the Phosphoria Sea. It's named the Phosphoria Sea for a very specific reason, because we have phosphate-rich rocks that are deposited throughout that finger of ocean. It's shallow water, and for a variety of reasons that are still a bit confusing, we get an incredible amount of phosphorus, the element phosphorus, incorporated in the seafloor sediments during that time period. And furthermore, not only do they get incorporated, but they get preserved. And that turns out to be worldwide very, very rare. Phosphate deposits from sediments are rare. We have in East Idaho one of the single largest deposits of phosphate sedimentary rock in the entire world. Florida and the Carolinas is the other big deposit in the United States. We have an amazing deposit. And so most people, certainly in East Idaho, have maybe a relative, maybe you, work for the phosphate industry. And so there's some awareness around here, but I still think in general, people really don't think of phosphate as being a big deal. It is, for the state of Idaho, this is the #1 mining resource in Idaho, by far, right? It's not silver, it's not gold, it's not lead or zinc, as it used to be maybe in the far past. Phosphate is it. And I would even go one step further. Phosphate is one of the most single important resources that is used. What's it used for? Fertilizer, right? So when we buy fertilizer by the bag, there's 3 numbers always at the top. NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. That's what you put on your plants. This middle number, that middle number is phosphorus. Probably, I would give a good bet that a lot of that fertilizer phosphorus that you use on your lawn probably originated right here in East Idaho, okay? 15%, something like 15% of all the phosphate that comes out of the United States is being produced here, and a lot of that is ending up on crops. That's generating the agricultural business that we have in the United States. This is feeding America, right? And it's generating part of the economy for Idaho. This is in our backyard. We should be proud of it. It's one of the biggest deposits in the world. And better than that, it gives us fossils. So we got lots and lots of fossils because, as it turns out, phosphate is great for fertilizer, but phosphate is also the stuff that your bones and your teeth are made of. So if you have an animal that's swimming in that finger of ocean water, the Phosphoria Sea, and it dies and it ends up buried in the sediments that are rich in phosphate, that supercharges its potential to become a fossil. And so this is a picture of a mine. This is what the mines look like out in Soda Springs. This is me at one of those Soda Spring mines back 8 years ago. They called me up and said, hey, we found a fossil you might be interested in. You want to see it? So I got in the car, headed over. This is what the seafloor of the Phosphoria Sea looks like today. So think, the seafloor is deposited horizontally, right? We've been to an ocean before and we've stood on the floor. The sediment builds up horizontally, but because we're in the mountain regions of Idaho, mountains, when they get built, form by compression and rocks getting piled one on top of another, squishing them around and folding them. And so the rocks that once were the seafloor 275 million years ago that were horizontal and soft, today are rocks, and in some places are upended almost vertically. So you are looking at a almost vertical face of the seafloor that is preserved from 275 million years ago. They thankfully put a giant arrow for me, the dummy, to find the big fossil, right? So somebody operating this big machine was sitting up in the cabin and saw this fossil on the wall. They called me up, and here's a bit more of a close-up of what it is. It's about a foot or so in diameter, big enough. And so we collected that one. Here's another phosphate mine. This one was run by Agrium back in the day. And here we go with a beautiful spiral that they found again on the wall as they were excavating this phosphate ore. And so they called this up, they took a picture. Great. Okay, so what do we see with this fossil? We call this the Buzzsaw shark. Its technical sciencey name is Helicoprion. And helico means spiral, and prion means saw. So the person who named this back in the 1890s obviously saw what anyone would see. This kind of looks like a circular saw blade. It's got pointy things, and pointy things are on a spiral. And the pointy things are bigger on the outside of the spiral and get continuously smaller as you go to the middle of the spiral, fair to say. And if you look at this one very carefully, maybe if you were very diligent, you would count that the spiral wraps around 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4¼ times, 4½ times. So we find specimens of this fossil that range actually pretty widely, of having a 1½ up to about 4½ spirals on them. And that's pretty typical. So the buzzsaw shark, we have this fossil in spades around here. It's amazing how many we have. So got sharks? We do. This is the same map from before, showing sort of the layout of our landscape as it was roughly 275, this one says 280 million years ago. And hopefully what you can see from this map, each of the circles represents places in the world today where we have recovered a buzzsaw shark fossil, okay? And the size of the circle, if you look at the specimen thing on the side, the size of the circle tells us something about how many specimens are found there. So we are number 1, yeah. Okay, so Idaho, we have way over 100, maybe 125 specimens that have been found out of Idaho, Most of those are coming out of the mines from Idaho that we have in public collections, I'll say that. If they're in private collections, who knows, I can't count them. But in public collections in museums around the world, over 100 of them come out of Idaho. And here at the Idaho Museum of Natural History, we have, somewhere between 85 and 90 of them. So we have easily the world's largest stockpile of buzzsaws. Why? Because they come from our backyard. 2, the next place that has a lot of them is in the Ural Mountains of Russia, in the mountain region of north central Russia. And then you can see that there's just 1 or 2 everywhere else. And if you look at this map very carefully, you'll see, 1, that you can find them, in a lot of places around the world. It's hard to tell from this map, but down here, number 14, that's Australia, West Australia. That was the first one that was found back in the late 1800s. But they're also found in Asia. So this is Laos, Japan, part of China. We find them in another part of China. We find them in northern Canada through the Arctic. We find them in Alaska. We find them in Alberta. Banff National Park has one. We have them in California, the Sierras, Nevada, down to Mexico. Okay, so those are all those. So what I see generally in this pattern is this animal is found everywhere in the world where there's water on a coastline and is currently a rock that can be found at the surface of the earth, right? Those are the things that I think we can say. So far, we don't have anything from South America or Africa. It's not clear if they didn't live there at all, or if the rocks aren't exposed, or maybe somebody hasn't found them yet. It's sort of an unknown, this southern part here. Okay, so we got lots of them. What do they look like? Well, these are some of the ones, oh, go ahead.
You have a question before we move on.
Yeah.
Why do we give, this is from Sophia, why do we give a scientific name rather than just call it a buzzsaw shark?
Great question. Why to have all these different names, honestly, right? Well, so The real reason comes back to, I'm gonna have to go back in history. In the late 1700s, there was a fellow by the name of Carl Linnaeus, and he lived in Sweden. And he decided, at that time, they were trying to figure out and give names to all sorts of the diversity of life, right? And he was really into plants. And so he had all sorts of different kinds of roses and different kinds of lilies and so forth. And he decided, let's get more structured about how we name things, because maybe you have 5 roses and maybe I think you actually have 7. Why don't we start giving them really specific names and structure the way that, and organize the way that we give names to things so that we can figure out how many different kinds of living things we actually have. And so Linnaeus back in the 1700s came up with the Linnaean classification system, which uses kingdoms, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So I'm and you are part of the genus and species. We are the species Homo sapiens. We're in the genus Homo, right? And so we decided, and the scientific community really latched onto this because it's very precise, right? To be able to name things differently. We decided that we were going to give every different thing, a different species, a name, and have a very rigid way in which we name them and make sure we're not duplicating names, that sort of thing. And part of the reason why we still have 2 different names for everything is we also decided as a community of scientists to give special names like Helicoprion davisi. I'll talk about davisi, the species, in a little bit. We decided to give them names that are Latin or Greek in origin, because those are so-called dead languages. They are languages that do not change. And so the word helico always will mean spiral, and prion always means saw. And the idea was, anyway, that those languages would not change in any way. And so if we formally give them those Latin or Greek names, that's a way to be more precise and avoid change through time. Okay, so here's the problem with Helicoprion davisi. That's a mouthful. It's a pain in the neck. So why not also have a common name? A common name that everyone else can use. It's less precise, but I don't know, it's kind of useful. I like to use the word lion instead of having to say, what, Panthera, which one is it? Is it Felis? I don't know. I should probably know that, shouldn't I? That's pretty sad. Instead of using those Latin-y, Greek-y names in common language, we use a common word, right? Which is less precise, but for the most part, it worked pretty good. So that's why we have 2 different names. We came up with Buzzsaw sharks because it kind of sounds more kind of freaky. That's what it came down to. And it kind of looks like a buzzsaw. Does it behave like a saw? Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there. That's a great question, Sophie. Thank you. Okay, so here's a picture of a lot of different Helicoprion fossils. And on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a bunch that we have here at the museum. There's a couple. This one in the middle, if you can see my cursor, is a Russian specimen, one from the Ural Mountains. It's really beautiful, absolutely gorgeous stuff that they get out there. This one's from Nevada. All the rest, oh, this one's from China. This is a big one from China. No, at least forgetting. That one's from Utah, actually. It's in the Utah Museum of Natural History collection, but it's from Idaho. And the rest of them are from our collections here. And they're really fantastic. Anyway, long story short, we have a lot of them. We did some work on it, and we figured out there's actually 3 different species of Helicoprion, which are shown in the illustration on the right-hand side. So we have Helicoprion davisi here. We have Helicoprion besanovi, which is the one that we mostly find in Russia. And then Helicoprion ergasiminon. Oof, there's an awful name. Anyway, so we have 3 different species that have different shaped teeth is what it comes down to. The guy behind me that you were seeing before, or maybe it's a gal, is Helicoprion davisi. And that's the one I'm going to focus on a little more in this talk because we know a lot more about it. Now, this picture is one of my favorite little diagrams to describe Helicoprion. I'm going to go back one. We have fossils, lots of these fossils, maybe 200 Helicoprion fossils now across the world. That shows a whole range of cool variation and lots of things that we can study. But at the end of the day, all we've got is a spiral of teeth, or of pointy things that we think are teeth. And you know, we might have maybe 130 teeth on one of these spirals. That's a lot of information we can get, but still, we don't have the rest of the animal, right? And so for the longest time, for over 100 years, since these were first found out in Australia and then later in Russia, people have really puzzled over the idea of where this spiral of stuff actually fit and belonged on the animal. And the problem has always been, we've got teeth, shark teeth preserve well. The rest of sharks don't preserve well because they're made of cartilage. So they're a pain in the neck to work with, totally. And I've been working with sharks now for a while, pain in the neck because they don't fossilize like other animals. So if you only got the teeth, or you've got sharp things that kind of look like teeth, turns out that teeth and scales are pretty much the same thing anatomically. And it turns out that the back, the dorsal fin on a lot of sharks, especially from this time period, have big tooth-like spines incorporated in them. So some of the earliest paleontologists thought that the sharks, that the spiral of teeth actually belonged on the back. And you'll see a diagram here from 1911, where a depiction of the shark shows the spiral sticking up on the back as though it was a defensive structure, something weird. Or maybe it stuck outside of its nose like that, and it could wave it around, kind of like a sawfish, maybe. Or maybe the whole thing wasn't spiraled up in life, and the animal could whip it out as a straight line. And you'll see up here that there's that idea, that maybe you could whip this thing out and smack fish with it, like a party favor, right? And it could roll back up. Maybe there's 2 in the mouth, maybe there's 4 in the mouth, all sorts of different configurations. But this is how, to me, this is how science works, right? We have all sorts of ideas that different researchers have put out there over the last 120 some years. And they're totally reasonable ideas because the data that we had at that point in time, a spiral of teeth, could fit any one of these scenarios. Maybe some are a little more weird than others, sure, but until you have more evidence to formulate an idea, a stronger opinion, this is as good as you can do. And so this is really how science works. And what it requires is more evidence, more body parts to be able to solve the problem. And that's what we were able to do a few years ago. So here is a specimen that my co-author and also museum employee, Jesse Pruitt, who gave the talk last week, he's got his fingers, his fish tattoo pointed at. This is a specimen that's really outstanding. This is Idaho 4. And so we have new technology that they didn't have back a long time ago. We can look inside rocks now, which is really, really cool. And so we're going to do that here in a sec. So this is just a view of IMNH 37899. We give it a common name called Idaho No. 4. Idaho No. 4 is a rock that's, it's about a foot, maybe a foot and a half in size. It's kind of heavy, but not super heavy. It's special because it was dug out of the ground. I talked to the guy who dug it out of the ground in 1951. And he at the time was doing some research out in the mines, looking at some other kinds of fossils. And during his lunch break, get this, during his lunch break, he took a half-hour lunch break, he said. And during that time, he found some rocks and he had his little sledgehammer with him. And he smacked open some rocks with his sledgehammer and he found 12 Helicoprions in his 30-minute lunch break. This was the 4th one. Damn, good lunch break. Well, so Idaho 4 is what you're looking at. On the left side, the left image is with the color, and then we did a laser scan of the outside of it and removed the color, and it kind of helps actually see some of the features that I'm going to talk about in a minute. You can see this flat, patchy kind of area on the surface. That's a piece of cartilage. Hey, cartilage can preserve. And here's a little button. This is a little attachment for a ligament, as it turns out, which is kind of cool. You can see the spiral of where the teeth are or where they fell out. And then here's actually a little flat pad down here. That's part of the jaw also. Very cool. All right. I'm going to take that rock and we're going to look through it. So this is it's a 1-minute little video that's going to scan through our rock using CAT scanner. This is the same technology that looks inside us when we have a broken bone or something like that, and they put us in a machine and they scan your body and they can see, you know, where the break is by looking through your body with x-rays and looking at the density difference between your skin, your muscles, your tissues, and the bone, which is much more dense. So similarly, the rock is dense and the fossil has a slightly different density. So it's going to show up in the rock if you jam enough x-rays through it. And since our fossil is quite dead, we don't care about how much x-rays we pump into it. Can't do this with humans so much. Okay, oh, no. I'm gonna try this again. Come on, video, work, video. Okay, maybe it'll work. Maybe. Oh, look at that. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is gonna scan its way through the fossil. I'm trying to remember if it kind of comes in sideways. But there, look, there's a shadow. That's part of the upper jaw you're seeing in the rock. Okay, the lump that's all cartilage. And here's where the teeth are, and you can see upper jaw and lower jaw down here. Keep on going. Don't worry about this weird spiral thing. That's an artifact of the x-rays being taken. All these little slices are showing us little shadows, just like in your x-ray when you go to the doctor. We can see the elements of bony cartilage. As it's passing through, the really cool thing about this animal, and it turns out some sharks do this, they add a little bit of bone to their cartilage, like a candy coating over the cartilage, especially of the jaw. As you can imagine, the jaw is going under a lot of stress and strain. And so the animal adds a little bit of bony, hard stuff to make it, you know, not break and not be squishy. And so that little candy coating is actually what we're seeing. We're not seeing the cartilage, we're seeing the bony coating on top of it. And so that we can take those images in a computer and then digitally model out what is inside the rock. And that's what's inside the rock. We color coded everything, and you're seeing it from a variety of different angles, right? So just if you can see my cursor, the animal on this picture on the top left, the animal is looking to the left in that view, right? So the long pointy thing is toward the nose. And what the green thing is a big piece of the upper jaw. The blue thing is the lower jaw, and they form a joint. The upper to lower joint is right here. And it's just kind of like your jaw joint, right? It's sort of a simple open, close kind of joint. And then this red structure is a continuation of the lower jaw, okay? And it comes in and it actually wraps up and anchors the spiral of teeth inside the mouth. It holds it from both left and right sides to keep it from wobbling back and forth, you can imagine. So this is what the jaw of the animal looks like. It's pretty damn cool. Yay. So on our project, we had you know, myself and Jesse, and then I'm a paleontologist. Jesse is a computer whiz, and so he can take the computer files and turn them into 3D models. We also worked with some ancient shark experts and some modern biology shark experts. The modern biologists are able to take what they know about the bite and bite forces involved in modern sharks and apply that to the fossil version. And so what they've done is they've taken our jaw structure that we have in the fossil, and they've applied some muscles on top of it. So here's our jaw, and based on the shapes and the bumps and the curves, they can make some educated guesses about what muscle masses are going to be, where they're going to connect, how big they're going to be, and so forth. And then we can come up with a model for how we think the jaw actually opens and closes and how the spiral of teeth might actually function in a bite. So that's what I'm going to show next. So here's our animal. It kind of looks a little freaky if you haven't seen a shark without its flesh on before. But these big bulby things, those are the nasal capsules, part of its schnoz. They have a good sense of smell for a water animal. And then here's the top of his skull. Maybe you can see the top of his skull. And he's looking at us here. On the right-hand image, he's looking to the left, obviously, and there's his teeth. We've color-coded the teeth, so as the mouth opens and closes, you can keep track of individual teeth and how they might clamp down on your hand if it was stuck in there. Okay, so I'm gonna advance a little bit. Doink, doink, doink. Okay, so it's opening up, maybe about that far, and now it's gonna close on your hand. Ouch. Okay, and then it opens. Okay, I'm gonna close it again. Pay attention to what the red tooth does, and imagine your hand in its mouth. What's the red tooth gonna do to you? Ouch. And it's pulling back, right? It slices and pulls back. Now, similarly, watch what happens with the blue tooth. Pick any of the blue teeth, okay? It's not hitting your fingers yet until about maybe now, and then it's gonna pull you back. So each of the teeth hits the food at slightly different points along the trajectory as the mouth closes. This is key to how this jaw functions. The other really key important thing about this jaw is the upper jaw and the lower jaw are about the same size as the spiral of teeth. And that means that the jaw joint, the pivoting point right here, is really, really close to the teeth, okay? The teeth are not far away from it. So that means that the curvature of the teeth as they close are actually going to curve in a way that behaves kind of like a saw, not a free spinning saw, but there's rotation involved. And so you're gonna get nailed by 10, maybe 12 teeth that are gonna slice through you. Awesomeness. Okay, I'm going to unshare my screen for a second. If I can do that, if I can figure this out. Oh boy. See what happens here. Okay, I want to go to video, maybe. Am I video? Can you see me?
No, you still have your screen share on.
I'm still doing screen share. Screen. Okay, do you see me now? No?
Still your screen.
Damn. Oh. How do I not share?
I can stop it for you.
Can you do it for me? Oh, awesome. Better. Okay. Okay, here's the demonstration part of the program. Okay, so I'm gonna try this. Stay with me. I'm moving my table. Okay, here is the jaw. Here's the same thing. We've made a 3D print. Hey, hi. We made a 3D print of that same jaw that you saw, and then we put a little motor on it, and I can press this button and it's going to open and close. And the really cool thing about it is if you watch those teeth open and close, it slices. Okay. Oh, yes. Bad news. Bad news if you are meat. Okay, that's the take-home message of that, right? Okay, so, oh, it's still moving. Oh, look at it go. Look at him go. Maybe it won't stop now. Huh, guess he's hungry. Okay, so as that thing closes, right, it's moving past the meat in sort of that curvy way. Oh dear. It wants to keep eating, oh dear. Okay, I'm gonna go back to sharing screen so I don't get eaten. Let's see, let's try this. Okay, do you see my,
Yep.
We're good?
We're good.
Awesome, it's still going, oh my goodness. Okay, so that's how the teeth work, right? So it's chopping and chopping and dicing and chopping. Okay, boink, 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 boink. So how does this thing work? What's the best understanding of how this thing works? We have a spiral of teeth, and we've known this for a very long time. We've got a spiral of teeth, and now our new fossil and being able to look inside the rock demonstrates that it's definitely inside the jaw and that the jaw wraps effectively around it. It's the same size as the spiral, and the spiral is contained inside the mouth. So this is an animal, this is the only animal, by the way, in the history of ever to have a jaw like this. It doesn't have teeth like you, right? Your teeth are around the side of your mouth. They wrap around. This animal has its teeth in the middle of its mouth, midline. Weird, okay? And it has two fundamental rules, and it breaks some of the rules of sharks. We know about sharks. They make teeth throughout their life, right? So if you have a great white shark or a mako shark, they're gonna make, something like 20,000 teeth in their lifetime. And they grow, they get into place, they get used, they get eaten, they eat things, they break off into the leg of whatever they ate, and then they make another one. And they do that 20,000 times in their life. What a waste of bone, right? Helicoprion made teeth throughout its life too. It made about 120 teeth in its lifetime, if it lived that long. But here's the difference. This animal did not shed its teeth. It was stuck with them for the rest of its life. It stuck with them because really each of those little teeth are bound together on one root. Really, this is one tooth with 126 crowns. And because of that, modern shark teeth are made to fall off and made to break off. These teeth are not made to break off. And so if you are making teeth forever, but you can't get rid of them, you have a space problem. Where are you going to put them all? This animal makes the anatomical choice to build them on a curved root. And by putting them on a curved root, they are able to grow over top of their older teeth by spiraling 1, 2, 3, 4.5 times through the duration of their life. So the way it works is new teeth, new crowns are added to this continuous root at the back of the mouth, kind of where the back of your tongue is. And as the animal grows and gets older, it makes new teeth at the back of the mouth and pushes the whole assembly line forward in the mouth. And so new teeth are made back here, and the whole works is pushed forward one tooth at a time until eventually that spiral dives down into the lower jaw, hidden from the world, never to be used as teeth again. And eventually they get pushed to the point where they get wrapped over top by the next set of teeth. This happens 4 to 4.5 times in the animal's life if they get that old. So this is a very strange, it's a one-time only animal that's ever committed to making a full spiral of overlapping teeth, all because it's retaining its teeth and making them throughout its life. This also means, really interestingly, unlike every other shark that I see as a fossil, every single tooth that the animal made in its lifetime is preserved in one fossil. Compare that to like if you were studying another kind of shark that sheds its teeth. When you find the teeth, you find just one. Here, I get the entire history of an animal recorded in the fossil. That's actually pretty nice. Tells us something about the growth of the animal, about how big they get, and so forth. That's kind of fun. From our work, we were able to come up with reconstructions of what the head of the animal looks like as a result of the jaw, and also other animals that it's related to. And so this is where we get into the educated guessing, right? We have the jaw, we have the teeth. We don't have the eye. We don't even have the gills. So I don't know if it has 5, 6, or 1 gill. It could have any of those. We have some relatives of this animal that are in the general family for which we know something about the body. In those fossils, we don't seem to have pelvic fins. And so our reconstructions don't show fins towards the tail end of this, where the legs might be for this animal at the back end. We imagine this animal being a very large body predator. Why? Because of its teeth. Its teeth are sharp. This is what its teeth look like. And this is the real fossil, 5 centimeters, so that's a couple inches in size. These aren't very big teeth, but I'll tell you what, if you run your finger over either side of these, they are serrated steak knives. This tooth will cut you today, 275 million years later. They're double-sided steak knives, and as you've seen from the jaw, when it opens and closes, you're getting hit by 10 to 12 of these things, front and back, and punctured. It's going through you. This is a meat-cutting instrument. Now, one of the weird things is because we've got all the teeth preserved of the animal throughout its life, we've looked for broken teeth or worn down teeth, and it's extremely rare. Out of 10,000 teeth I've looked at, maybe 2 or 3 look broken during the lifetime of the animal. So whatever this animal is eating, it's eating meat, no doubt about it. These are steak cutters, but it's not eating something that's really bony or heavily armored. So maybe they're eating sharks. Very likely they're eating squid, like those little squid relatives we were talking about earlier at the beginning of this. So this is the full view that we have of the buzzsaw shark, which is an Idaho animal. This is an animal that is as Idaho as it gets, except it's in the mountains and it's an ocean animal. That's weird. The buzzsaw shark of Idaho. This is an animal that got up to at least 35 feet. We're able to come up with that number. Again, we only have the jaws, we only have the teeth, but we can, because we know the size of the jaw and we know the size of the teeth, we know how big the jaws get. Remember that one at the beginning of the show, I showed this model on the wall. That's a full-size head. based on the largest fossils we get that are about 2.5 feet in diameter. That means the lower jaw is 2.5 feet. That means the skull is probably 4 feet. And then we have a way of knowing for fast swimming fish, there's a general ratio of body size to head size if you're going to be a fast swimmer. And so we're able to extrapolate or take the size of the jaw to figure out the size of the head, and then use the size of the head to make a decent guess at how long the body could be. And through that sort of reasoning, we're able to get up into the 35, possibly 40-foot range. Now, I'll tell you what, that's a big shark today, right? There are bigger animals in the sea than 35 feet today, not many. And through Earth history, there are some bigger animals. But at this point in history, 275 million years ago, during the Permian time period, Helicoprion, the buzzsaw shark that we have here in Idaho, was the single largest predator that had ever evolved up until that time period. If you were alive in the Permian, this would be your T-Rex. This is the biggest, nastiest predator ever in the history of the planet up until that time point. And it's still, even if that was swimming around today, I guarantee you would want nothing to do with it, right? It's a big beast. Now, was it successful? It's extinct. It went extinct. But based on all those fossils we have from Russia to Japan to China and here in the United States and Canada, it extends through rock that are dated over 8 million years. So this animal, the genus Helicoprion and its 3 different species, span 8 million years of Earth history, which for a genus is a very long time. That is hugely successful. Okay? Typical species last about 2 million years. That's about an average for species duration. So to have 3 species that make up this genus to last 8 million years is really good. This animal did very well. We're not really sure why it went extinct. There's no major extinction event that happens when they disappear, but they're big animals, they're big predators, they're probably relying on a lot of food, and maybe there was some kind of downturn in world environments and food sources for it. Big predators are vulnerable to changes in the food supply. And so these big animals are very successful, but also very vulnerable at the same time. So that's the end of my slideshow. I was going to show a couple fossils just because I like to do that, but I also want to give a plug to a few things. If you want to learn a little bit more and you're like online or you're kind of waiting to return to the normal world, if you want to see more about buzzsaw sharks, first and foremost, we have the best collection in the world of the real thing. They are here. So when we get back open, please do come back over to the Idaho Museum of Natural History here in Pocatello. We've got 80 some of these things. We always have them on display in some capacity. So come on out to see them. There's a book that's all about the Helicoprion shark and the discovery of it that was written by Susan Ewing a few years ago. You should be able to find that on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. And then online, I believe you can find this maybe even on YouTube right now, or if you have a subscription that allows you to find river monsters. They did an episode that does feature Helicoprion with us out at the mines in Soda Springs. And it's episode 3 of season 7, and they do a feature on it. So I'm gonna, Amber, if you can unshare my screen, because I can't figure it out apparently. Perfect, thank you. I was gonna show you a couple things. The teeth are still going. It's really creepy. It's freaking me out, actually. It just keeps biting.
It misses us.
I think the button is stuck or it's really hungry. So this is what a Helicoprion fossil looks like. I'm always backwards on these. Okay, there it is. So this is a helico fossil that obviously isn't super huge. That's why I can lift it. They occur in rocks. This one has probably about 100 teeth on it. Pretty nice fossils. They are really, really nice teeth, right? Lots of little points and spiraled. But I want to show you something that they co-occur with. Well, this is one of the smaller ones. We have bigger ones downstairs. Again, I'm too weak to lift. This is one of those coiled cephalopods, the squid relatives. And this is the shell that would have been, in fact, the animal would be swimming like this. Here's a spiral. Hopefully you can see that's sort of like a spiral. And there'd be an animal kind of swimming out this end of it, right, with tentacles and a little beak. Predators. And these, You can probably maybe see all the internal structures inside the shell. Really lovely fossils. These were often mistaken for Helicoprion because they're found in the same rocks. They're spiraled. And so you can see how the resemblance, maybe the others are also part of these guys, and who knows. But living here in Idaho, back in that seaway, that little finger seaway that cut in, the Phosphoria Sea, it was absolutely teeming with life. If you were here snorkeling, it would have been pretty amazing. It would be kind of maybe on par with the folks that go diving off the southern tip of South Africa to go look for great white sharks. I think this region was an attraction for buzzsaw sharks to hang out, to congregate. And obviously they were living here, they died here, they're preserved beautifully in Idaho. But one of the reasons we get so many of them, guess why? We have mines. For 100 years, we've been digging these things out of the ground. And so for 100 years, these have been, they've been coming out of the ground. If they had just only been found at the surface, we wouldn't have so many of them. So it's a combination of the animals were here, we have the right age, we have the right rocks, they're at the surface, and the fossils were getting preserved pretty nicely, but also we've been digging through a lot of these rocks over the last 100 years, and thankfully, the mining operations have taken care of getting these fossils over to the Natural History Museum so that we could take care of them for a very long time. So that's where I'll stop. If anybody has questions, I am more than happy to take questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How can you tell the age? Like, do you know how long they lived based on the length and the depth, I guess, of the teeth?
How old does a Helicoprion get? Well, so I'm going to turn. Here's our big boy. This animal, this is obviously a sculpture, and the sculpture has teeth in it, and the teeth are an exact match to a fossil we have in the basement that has 127 teeth in it. I had to count. 127 teeth, and it's the second biggest Helicoprion we have in our collection.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how old it is. There's no way to tell how many teeth it made in 1 year of its life. There's no animal that's closely related to it today that allows us to get an age on the animal of how old it lived. There's a few strategies we have to maybe guessing at it. And the fossil I was just holding up, actually, this one, might give us the answer. So a few years back, we don't have the results back yet, but a few years back, a student at the University of South Florida made little scrapings of the teeth and got the chemicals off of, got a little bit of the tooth in a vial and did that for a number of the teeth on here. There's about 100 and some teeth. And so I think he took maybe 20 or 30 or 40 samples of each tooth. So he got a little bit of tooth. And in that little bit of tooth, there's some elements. There's some mostly oxygen and phosphorus, and some trace elements of other things. And what he was hoping to do, and we're not sure if this is going to work or not, was going to see if the chemical signature in the teeth changes at all across the teeth. Remember, we have every tooth the animal made from when it was a baby in the middle, the small teeth, all the way to the big teeth at the end. So imagine if the chemistry of the teeth changes from when it's a baby to when it's an adult. Maybe, this big maybe we could see a change that is actually changes and then goes back, and changes and goes back, and changes and goes back. If we could do that, then maybe we could say, well, there's a seasonal variation. Maybe the animal moved around or its food source changed or whatever. Maybe there was some kind of time reason why the chemistry of its teeth changes over time. Then you can then make an argument that links time and number of teeth based on the chemistry recorded in the teeth. That's probably the only way we're going to be able to get an age estimate on this animal. Otherwise, it's just pure guesswork. We can very much say the more teeth it has, probably the older it is. And I suspect that the animal, when it's young, is making more teeth per year than when it's old, simply by virtue as it adds bigger teeth, the whole spiral gets bigger, which means the jaw has to get bigger, which means the body has to get bigger. And I can imagine that would run into a problem if it kept producing the same number of teeth all the way through its life. I think it's slowing down as it gets bigger. But again, that's a guess. Good question.
Yeah, we have a question from Malcolm, and he would like to know, what is the fewest number of teeth you have found in a spiral?
Oh, I almost brought that specimen with me. The answer is, it's in the paper, about 80, 75 or 80. And that's a spiral that's like, it's this camera, about that big. It's tiny. It goes, it loops over about 1.5 times or something like that. One of the things that we found when we did the work that identified that there are 3 different species, we measured every Helicoprion specimen we could find. Jesse and I measured the teeth, evaluated the shape of the teeth. We measured everything you could imagine about these teeth, 100 times per specimen, right? Okay, so we measured, and we graphed and did all the nerdy things that scientists love to do. And the end result of that work is that we found that really small specimens are exceedingly rare. And we also found that there's a change that happens in the shapes of the teeth that you only notice, and you can only tell the species apart after about the 90th tooth, 80th or 90th, I think it was 80th, something like that, tooth. And so that's where we basically say you're an adult at that point. So the juveniles are less than 80 teeth, and the adults are more than 90 teeth. And that's when you actually see differences in the shapes of teeth that tell very different types of animals that we assume are different species. But yeah, the smallest is around 80. And I don't know why they're so rare. Maybe it's just they're really small. And so, when the mind is going through and finding these things, they're seeing the big ones. That's possibly the bias, or I don't know. It's hard to account for that. Good question.
I don't have any other questions. I don't think I can think of one right now. Did it stop chomping?
No, it's still going. It's still going. It's like it's been possessed. Yeah, it's gonna start. It's got a 3-second delay on it because we manufactured that into the motors, but it might start again. Maybe it stopped. Okay. A little creepy.
Well, we're almost to our hour.
Excellent.
I just want to remind everyone that next week we'll have Dr. Joseph Cornell from ISU's biology department talking about creepy crawlies, so the insects and the spiders that live around us. You guys can register for that, or just join us here again next Friday at 2. And it looks like it's about to get sunny outside, so it's time to start our weekend.
Yay.
Thank you, Leif.
All right.
You have a good weekend.
Right on.